Hello, everybody. You might have been wondering where this week's presentation was. Well, the audio was so bad that I had to redo it. Well, here we are, week 6. I'm going to take myself out of the picture and say, welcome to your brain. Woohoo! What a remarkable organ the human brain is. But honestly, how does it do it? How does our brain learn stuff? Well, all that stuff comes to us in sensory information from many different ways. And if it catches our attention, then it's going into our long-term or working memory. From there, it goes into a rehearsal and encoding process. And after that, it goes into long-term memory, and we can say that we have learned something. But here's the thing about that short-term working memory. It's just a little mental sticky note. You can't put too much in there. So you can't present too much material at one time because the working memory only lasts 10 to 15 seconds. It's in that rehearsal and encoding process where the material is being revisited over and over again. The teacher's presenting it again. I'm researching more about it. I'm even thinking about it. I'm remembering what we did in class. All of that has more to do with going into long-term memory. Do not depend on short-term working memory. The two key elements here are time and repetition. Now, in 2012, this man came to COTESOL, John Parks Letelier, and did a 2-part session on the brain. And here's what I learned from him. Adults need a change of state every 20 to 30 minutes. So this means you need to change the activity, meaning the focus, or get them up out of their seats, have them turn around, have them look somewhere else in the room. The other thing I learned from him was this wonderful combination. So I'm going to give you a combination for repeating new material to help students put that new material into long-term memory. So you know how to work a combination lock, right? First we have to go to the right, and we're going to go to the right and stop at the number 10. 10 minutes after the first introduction, students should be reviewing that information in a worksheet, in a little quiz, but they're doing some activity that uses that new vocabulary or that new concept. All right, now we have to go to the left. We have to pass 10. We have to pass the number 0, and we're going to stop on number 24. 24 hours after the first introduction. Now after 24, we go to the right, and we're going to stop on the number 7. 7 days after the first introduction. So your combination is 10 minutes, 24 hours, and 7 days. Adults need procedural closure, and this means that they need time after you've presented something to think about it, to reflect on it. And this really enhances memory. So when you have finished an activity, tell the students it's finished. Have them put their papers in their notebooks while you silently get your materials for the next activity. They're reviewing in their minds what they just did. And that reflection helps that information go into long-term memory. We've got 100 billion neurons in our brains, and if I add up all of the connections, the synapses, and all of those things that fire in our brains, it's 150 trillion connections. A guy named Hebb in the 1940s discovered that when we are learning something, our neurons are sending these electrical impulses. They're firing, but they never fire in isolation. Neurons always fire with other neurons. It might be recalling an old memory that reminds you of this new information, or recalling something that you know that's opposite from this new information, or it's similar. But neurons that fire together wire together. That's Hebb's law. Let me show you an example of how that can work in ESL. Here's an beginning ESL class. These students are in a line dialogue practicing this basic introductory conversation. They're going to practice with a partner for 1 minute. Then I'm going to move one line, and they're going to practice with another partner for 1 minute. But every time they practice this conversation, they're going to also shake hands. So they have got a multisensory cornucopia coming at them. They've got the auditory, they've got the visual, they've got their own speaking that they're hearing, and they've got the physical experience of shaking hands. And by the end of 5 minutes, they have got this conversation pretty much down pat. We can help students make a donkey bridge, an Esselbrücke. That helps them connect new information to something familiar. And you can do this with pictures. You can do it with mnemonics. If you studied music, face are the notes on the treble clef in the spaces, F, A, C, and E, or the notes on the lines. Every good boy does fine, E, G, B, D, and F. Or if you were ever learning the 5 Great Lakes in the United States, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, maybe you use the mnemonic Holmes. I like using the mnemonic of the 5 fingers of the hand for teaching the 5 vowels. A is the thumb, the index is E, middle is I, fourth is O, pinky is U. And I always make sure we're using the same fingers for those vowels so that students help remember A, E, I, O, and U. I'm learning German and I want to learn how to say a stone. I keep forgetting the word for stone, but I know who Albert Einstein was. So if I can remember that Ein is one, Stein is a stone, if I have a mental picture of Albert Einstein holding a rock, now I can remember how to say Einstein for a stone. Learning is nothing more than memory and recall. And we have 2 aspects of our memory, how well we know something, the strength, storage strength, and then we have the recall strength. And here's the incredible thing. The more we pack into that filing cabinet called our brains, the more our brains are making capacity to learn more. It's seemingly endless. But we can use it or lose it. It is possible to lose long-term memories if you don't call upon those neurons to fire. So I've had elderly students who came as very small children to the United States, and they don't remember their native language because they haven't called upon those neurons to fire. Here's a poser. If the human brain was a hard drive, how many hours of TV could it record before it's full? Really? Full? We'll get to that in a minute. So which number do you think is correct? Well, you can probably guess it's going to be the bigger one, 3 million hours. That's an awful lot of Game of Thrones and House of Cards. But this whole notion that your brain can get too full is just a myth. And as you just heard, the more we learn, the more our brains create capacity to learn more. So I'm going to call upon the Mythbusters to help me bust a few myths about the brain. First myth is we are either right or left brain dominant, and you've got to teach to my dominant hemisphere. Well, that is a myth because we might have a strength on one hemisphere or the other, but the truth is we use both hemispheres equally, and they are continually sending messages back and forth through the center part, the corpus callosum. Humans use only about 10% of our brains. I've heard this all my life. That is a big myth. It is busted. We use nearly 100% of our brains. There are no unused sections of our brains unless there has been a traumatic head injury or a stroke. Students should be taught according to their individual learning style. That's a myth. We may have a learning preference, but plan to teach to all of the modalities, the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, the reading-based learners. We all have a preference, but we all use all of our modalities. The older adults become, the harder it is for them to learn a new language. You can imagine that's a myth, and we now know from brain research that people are perfectly capable of learning new things, including languages, well into their 80s and 90s. There might be some physical issues like hearing and vision that might be affecting it. I really like this 3rd bullet point. Look how important context is. You can pause this slide to read all of the rest of these quotes if you want. Intelligence and one's ability to learn is hardwired into our DNA. It's an innate ability that won't change over time. Many of you already know that this is a myth because many of you already know about the concept of mindset. How we view our successes and our failures has more to do with our mindset and far little to do with our intelligence. So let's think about Luke and Yoda in the swamp. Yoda has got Luke balancing on one hand and balancing Yoda on a foot and raising stones with his mind. And then Yoda says, well, use that to bring your ship out of the swamp. And Luke says, moving rocks is one thing, but moving a ship is totally different. And Yoda says, no, no different, only different in your mind. You're going to meet this woman, Carol Dweck, and you're going to hear her talk about how she determined that our ability to learn has more to do with how we view ourselves as potential learners, what she calls the growth versus the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is Luke. He sees failure as insurmountable. He avoids challenge. He gives up easily. The growth mindset is Yoda. He embraces challenge. He persists. He actually believes that effort is what's needed, and he learns from his failures and from criticism. So Yoda brings the ship out of the swamp with one finger, and Luke says, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, that is why you fail. If you don't believe you can do it, the chances are you probably won't do it. You're going to meet Angela Duckworth, and you're going to hear her talk about her theory about grit, which is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals, and how she found the connection between grit and the growth mindset. We can promote a growth mindset in our classroom by praising the efforts and strategies and ideas and never praise a student for being intelligent. We're going to teach them how we learn and let them know that they're all capable of learning. We're going to use the term not yet, and we're never going to tell a student, you can't do it. Remove bias and prejudice from the classroom and celebrate their failures. At least they tried. We can promote long-term memory by activating their schema to make those connections and using graphic organizers and pictures, and explicitly teach them good study skills. Be patient. Provide lots of repetition. Which of the following things are true? Pause the video for a second and read all of these and decide which ones you think are true. The fact is, they're all true. None of us are good at multitasking, but many of us feel good when we think we've done it. The truth is that one task is being sacrificed for the sake of another task. So, teach our students to study smart. Study in short segments for 20 minutes and then go take a walk or go play with the dog or have a snack or watch some TV. Get some exercise, eat nutritious food, get lots of sleep, because sleep and relaxation is when long-term memories are formed. Praise the effort and the ideas, not the intelligence. Look at the difference in student performance when the effort was praised. Brain research tells us that the human brain is very plastic and capable of healing. And we know adults can learn well into their senior years, but we can lose old knowledge if we don't fire those neurons. But when we know we're improving, we continue to improve. Do you remember what that combination was for reviewing new material? This week, these are your assignments: to read Midnight Resurrections and watch a bunch of short videos and explore a web page and learn about age and language learning. The discussion forums, I hope you share some experiences from Red Rocks Community College, and your reflective journals. You're going to be reading and hearing about these brain gurus. They are all amazing men. They've written amazing books about the brain. And I really hope that you enjoy this week. These are some of those resources. And with that, I'm going to say, have a great time learning about your brains.